Thank you for joining the webinar. My name is Natalie Hemmerich, and I'm a staff attorney here at the Public Health Law Center. I work on the commercial tobacco team, and my work focuses primarily on the federal regulation of commercial tobacco products and local Minnesota commercial tobacco control. I will be the moderator of the webinar today. At the outset, I want to acknowledge that here at the center, we are using the term heated cigarettes for these products, but other terms for these products you may have heard before are heated tobacco products or heat not burn products. Briefly, the Public Health Law Center is located in St. Paul, Minnesota, and we have been doing public health policy work for nearly 20 years. All of the work that we do is done in consideration of advancing equity. What that means is that we are focused on partnering with communities and organizations to use the power of law in a way that addresses the social determinants of health and meets the specific needs of all communities, especially those who unfairly bear a greater burden of public health and other societal harms. At the center, we provide what is called legal technical assistance, which is a little different than what you often think of when you think of lawyers, meaning we don't do any direct representation or lobbying, but we do provide educational feedback and legal research. We put out publications and trainings to educate and empower advocates and decision makers, and we work closely with communities and advocates to help develop public health policy. Our presenters today are Kristy Marynak, Public Health Analyst from the CDC, and Hudson Kingston, Staff Attorney here at the Center. Kristy will give us an overview of some of the heated cigarette products and discuss the research on the public health impacts of these products. She joined the CDC in 2011 and began serving as a policy analyst for CDC's Office on Smoking and Health in 2013. In her current role as team lead for policy and partnerships, she oversees a team of policy analysts and provides subject matter expertise on tobacco control policy to inform local, state, and federal efforts, scientific publications, and communications to the public. Hudson will discuss how heated cigarettes fit into broader state regulation and highlight some of the policy considerations around regulating heated cigarettes. As a staff attorney, Hudson Kingston provides legal technical assistance on commercial tobacco control issues to public health professionals and organizations, legal professionals, and advocates in Minnesota and throughout the United States. He also has a background in other public interest areas, most recently in environmental law. Heated cigarettes have been around and in the minds of the industry since around the 1980s. Although major industry players have released several heated cigarettes in the past, the most pertinent product is an earlier form of Revo or Neocore called Eclipse. Internationally, several heated cigarette products have been sold, including IQOS, Glow, iFuse, and PlumeTech. Although the earlier attempts to introduce these products in the US were not profitable, success abroad has stirred new interest in introducing these products into the US market. We at the Center have categorized the products as being two distinguishing elements. They are different from conventional cigarettes because they heat at a temperature lower than a conventional cigarette, and they are different from e-cigarettes because they actually use processed commercial tobacco leaf as a nicotine source, the flavor source, or both. Part of the reason that lawmakers, especially state and local lawmakers, have become concerned about heated cigarettes recently is that there has been some action at the federal level around heated cigarettes. First, heated cigarettes meet the federal definition of tobacco product because they are made or derived from tobacco. That means to be legally introduced into the US market, they must have pre-market review and authorization from the FDA. Recently, Philip Morris International has applied to market IQOS, which the FDA is still considering, and British American Tobacco, which now owns Reynolds, has received FDA authorization for Neocore, formerly called Revo. IQOS has also been in the news because along with their pre-market review application, they have applied to be able to claim that IQOS reduces a user's exposure to toxicants compared to conventional cigarettes. This is also pending with the FDA, but it's important to note that the FDA could approve PMI to market IQOS even if they deny the application to market it as a reduced exposure product. Another important issue is that another heated cigarette, vape leaf, is currently being sold in 6 states without prior authorization from the FDA. With that, I will turn the presentation over to Kristy.
Well, thank you so much, Natalie, and thanks to all of my colleagues in the Tobacco Control Legal Consortium for the invitation today to talk about heated tobacco products and why it's important in public health that we are paying attention to the landscape of tobacco products. Okay, So what is the importance of this topic from a public health perspective, and why does CDC care about this issue? We all know that the landscape of tobacco products is continually changing, and I look at it as part of my responsibility as a policy analyst and working in tobacco control for the nation's public health agency to pay attention to what is being marketed outside of the US, as well as products that have been marketed in the past within the US, so that we can anticipate what is coming and inform the way that we talk to the public about tobacco products, anticipate the policy implications for those products, and identify the needs for our surveillance systems to ask questions of the public about use of these products, so we can gauge trends among both young people and adults, including cigarette smokers. So the good news, I don't know if you can see the image in this slide, but I had a graph that showed the significant declines that have occurred in cigarette smoking rates over time. The good news is that we know that the cigarette smoking rates, both for youth and adults, are at the lowest rates in recorded history. However, the flip side of that is that it's not just cigarettes anymore. We do know that cigarettes remain the top selling tobacco product, both in the United States and globally. But we're not in the world of just cigarettes or just cigarettes and smokeless anymore. We now know that e-cigarettes, as of 2014, are the most commonly used tobacco product among middle and high school students in the United States. And now we know that there are an additional type of products that will begin to re-enter the US market soon. So what are heated tobacco products? And you're going to see, I think, various iterations of how we describe these between Natalie and myself. The bottom line is that, yes, these products contain tobacco, and they also have been positioned by cigarette manufacturers, who are the ones who are making these products, as something that delivers a throat hit that cigarette smokers expect, a little bit more heat to the back of the throat, as well as a faster nicotine delivery to the brain and to the lungs. So these products are sort of positioned to appeal to smokers who have tried e-cigarettes, are looking for alternatives, but rejected e-cigarettes. And we know that about a third of smokers have tried e-cigarettes and said, nope, not for me, I don't like it, and have gone back to exclusively smoking cigarettes. I apologize that this is a little bit of a fuzzy slide, but it comes from a really nice new fact sheet that the World Health Organization has released on heated tobacco products on their website. And the bottom line from this slide is that, as Natalie said, heated tobacco product technology is not new. It actually emerged in the United States in various test markets back in the 1980s when we were all watching TGIF. The products were unsuccessful pretty much across the board. Some of them were only tested for 1 year. Others were tested for longer. And there were both flame activated and electronic versions of the products way back when. So looking at some of the earlier prototypes of these products, this is an example of Eclipse, Premier, and the most recently marketed product in the United States, Revo. They all use basically the same technology. They are like a cigarette, except that they have a carbon tip on the end. So the user holds up a lighter to the carbon tip, drags on it until the tip glows red and it's activated, and they take drags on it until the tobacco is spent within the cord. And but the difference between this and cigarettes is that it doesn't burn down, so the length of the stick remains the same. These products come in packs of 20. They're about the same size and length of regular cigarettes and have typically been priced similarly to cigarettes. Then I wanted to show you the Accord, because you're going to see a lot of visual similarities between this product and the new Philip Morris IQOS product. This product was launched in the 1990s. It has a heating blade within the electronic device, and you put the cigarette-like stick into the device, and that heating blade pierces the stick. The heating blade heats up, and it internally heats the stick, and then the user drags on the stick. The sticks themselves are about half the length of regular cigarettes, but the packs look like mini cigarette packs. And this is a crosswalk of heated tobacco products, electronic cigarettes, and manufactured cigarettes. And I think it's important, and Natalie said it again, and I'll reiterate, that the main difference between heated tobacco products and electronic cigarettes is that electronic cigarettes deliver nicotine that is derived from tobacco but do not contain tobacco leaf, whereas heated tobacco products unambiguously contain tobacco leaf. Some other main similarities and differences are that e-cigarettes by definition are electronic and are not flame activated compared to heated tobacco product platforms that can be just flame activated. But heated tobacco products are really a very diverse platform of tobacco products. And you're going to see there are many differences. Of course, they also can be electronic. All of these products can deliver nicotine. And all of these products produce secondhand emissions, which is important for the public health implications of the product. E-cigarettes do not produce a side stream emission, like you see coming off of a burned cigarette if you have it in the ashtray. What is emitted is what the user exhales in the form of secondhand aerosol. In contrast, it appears that heated tobacco products can produce both mainstream or exhaled and side stream emissions. It's unclear if some or all heated tobacco products produce smoke or a smoke-like aerosol that might contain both some sort of components of aerosol and smoke. And both e-cigarettes and heated tobacco products can be used or adapted to deliver marijuana. There are vaporizer, quote-unquote, products into which you can insert marijuana leaf or a combination of marijuana and tobacco leaf. And these products supposedly heat to a temperature that does not produce combustion. So as Natalie mentioned, there are applications either pending or which have been approved by the FDA to be marketed in the United States. We should begin seeing the R.J. Reynolds Eclipse menthol and Eclipse products, which are flame activated, appear in the United States in test markets in the coming months. Because in July 18, FDA approved the products to be marketed. And FDA said that they call the products non-combusted cigarettes because they meet the legal definition of cigarette, but there's evidence that the heat does not reach a level sufficient to cause combustion. And then the Philip Morris IQOS product, contrary to some popular belief, IQOS is actually not an acronym for I Quit Ordinary Smoking. I've been told that it is just IQOS, whatever that means. And that product emerged first in Japan and then eventually in 34 countries total as of April 2018. It quickly took market share in Japan. Part of the reason for this may be that in Japan, e-cigarettes that contain nicotine are actually not allowed. So there are a lot of users, a lot of people who smoked cigarettes and who were interested in non-combustible alternatives and were a fitting audience for these products. The products have not taken off quite as quickly in other countries, including in Europe. And we know that Philip Morris has submitted applications to FDA for both approval to sell the products in the United States, as well as to make health claims about the products. And the independent scientific advisory committee that reviews evidence from these applications and makes recommendations to the FDA about the quality of evidence met in January of 2018 and voted that the scientific evidence was not sufficient to accept all of the claims but one. CDC has begun conducting surveillance among adults using a rapid response online panel, the STILES survey, and we published on this. We were the first to publish on rates of awareness and use of the products. Pardon me. Sorry for the cell phone. In the American Journal of Preventive Medicine earlier this year. The bottom line is that, as you would expect, because these products are not widely available in the United States, awareness and ever use of the products among American adults is relatively low. However, I'm going to skip to the next one so you can see the ever use slide. We do know that it is more that younger adults under the age of 30 are more likely to have ever tried or to have heard of the products compared to adults over 30, and current smokers were significantly more likely to have tried the products. Nearly 3% of smokers said they had tried them relative to never smokers. A quick note about heated tobacco product marketing. I think it's really interesting to see a juxtaposition of marketing for the Philip Morris USA Accord product, the precursor to the IQOS, with the IQOS product in the mid-aughts, because they use very similar language to describe the product. So in the 1990s, Philip Morris was saying virtually no lingering odor and no ashes. And then in 2015, an ad that was used in Asia, no fire, no ash, less lingering smell. I think a big difference is that technology companies have really changed the way that products are marketed, with Apple stores and geek squads. And so what you see on the right in this slide is an IQOS store in Tokyo in 2015. There are now several of these stores, including one in Soho in London. And these products, these stores allow for people to learn how to use the product, to try it in the store, and to troubleshoot. And they do have their own sort of geek squad, people who work at the counter and are eager to teach new consumers about the product. All of the major cigarette companies internationally are heavily investing, with the exception of Imperial Tobacco Group. The British American, Japan Tobacco, and Philip Morris are all heavily investing in heated tobacco product technologies. And part of the reason why they may be doing this is because these products really offer a profit margin that is significantly higher even than combusted cigarettes, which are, as we know, one of the most profitable products on the market. The heat stick, for example, by IQOS, yields about a 50% higher profit margin than cigarette packs do. And these products can be made with major economies of scale and on cigarette machines, which can be adapted to produce these new products. So we have key questions about the public health implications of these products, and we're going to need independent research to answer them. And we won't know, we won't have complete answers to many of these questions for a while. So the fundamental questions of do they burn or do they produce incomplete combustion, because byproducts of incomplete combustion are often some of the most harmful constituents of cigarette smoke. Is there smoke or something like it? What are the contents of those emissions? Are there differences between the different types of products, the flame activated versus the electronic products, and how people use them? Do the products, of course, an important question, do they or will they appeal to youth, young adults, and non-tobacco product users? And do they have the potential to reduce harm among established cigarette smokers if used as a complete substitute for all cigarettes and other combusted tobacco products? So we don't have complete answers to all of these, but there are some studies that are emerging from independent researchers, one of which found that heating tobacco to temperature similar to heated tobacco products releases nicotine in some cigarette smoke compounds, and the emissions increased as the temperature increased, as you might suspect. Another looked specifically at the IQOS and compared emissions to a reference cigarette and found many of the same constituents in cigarette smoke, such as carbon monoxide and volatile organic compounds. And I do like to quote an executive at Imperial Tobacco Group. The company had said that they planned not to get into the business a couple of years ago. They may have changed their strategy, in fact, but an Imperial Tobacco Group executive said that these products are better described as heat and burn rather than heat not burn. Imperial did its own study of another company's product and recommended that the products not be allowed to be used in public indoor areas where smoking is prohibited. So there's an interesting contribution to the literature from a tobacco company. However, even though we don't have complete scientific evidence answering those specific questions and the myriad other questions that I think we'll need to know the answers to later on, we have a really firm foundation of scientific evidence from which we have a sort of foundation to approach our work in public health, both messaging to the public and, as others will talk about, the policy approaches that we can take to ensure that the public is protected from secondhand exposures to these products. And the first is the Surgeon General's finding from 2016 that the use of products containing nicotine in any form among youth, including in e-cigarettes, and we could add heated tobacco products, is unsafe. We also, in the 2016 report, saw that the Surgeon General concluded that we're not only concerned about emissions from combusted tobacco products. Combusted tobacco products are not the only types of tobacco emissions out there. We know that secondhand e-cigarette aerosol is a type of emission that is not as safe as clean air. And we could say the same for other types of tobacco product emissions, including from heated tobacco products. Generally, we know that products containing tobacco and nicotine can be assumed to be both harmful and addictive. And so based on these principles, we know that we should be cautionary in our approach to looking at any of these new products in the continually expanding landscape of tobacco products. And this is my last slide, so you can wake up if you missed the rest of the presentation. The bottom line for public health is that this evolving landscape of tobacco products requires that we have a focus on comprehensive efforts that address all forms of tobacco products and anticipate new forms, efforts to prevent youth access and use of any tobacco product, protection of clean indoor air standards, as well as tobacco-free norms. Also, the importance of completely eliminating combusted tobacco use and preventing dual use of non-combustible electronic or heated tobacco products in combination with cigarettes and other combusted products. And then education to the public about the harms of any tobacco use, particularly for vulnerable populations, and research and surveillance to understand these products. So thank you so much. And I know we're going to be able to answer questions later on, but I'll hand it over to my co-presenters.
All right, thank you, Kristy. Hi, everyone. My name is Hudson Kingston, and I'm a staff attorney at the Public Health Law Center at Mitchell-Hamlin School of Law. As Natalie said, I'm going to talk about existing state and U.S. territory definitions. We'll then discuss potential tweaks for regulation that could make what are often ambiguous standards more clearly applicable to products that we at the center are calling heated cigarettes. And today we'll be covering 3 legal domains that nearly every state and territory is regulated: smoke-free standards, minimum legal sales age, and tax law related to cigarettes. We hope that this presentation and the publications we've put on our website get you thinking about how your jurisdiction can cover these products with existing law, and also how updates to definitions might be appropriate to tighten up the regulatory regime. All right, so what is a heated cigarette? The industry calls them heat not burn, but that isn't a marketing statement. Do they actually burn? As with so many legal questions, the answer might be it depends. As Natalie presented already, for the purposes of this discussion, the products that we're going to be talking about have 2 consistent elements. They heat at a temperature lower than normal cigarettes, producing the aerosol, and they contain processed tobacco leaf, either as a flavor source or a nicotine source. All of the devices we're talking about are also handheld, and I'm sure that there are other common elements, but those 2 elements are the distinguishing characteristics that make these different from the tobacco products you're more familiar with. Also, as I think Kristy and Natalie have already teed up, there's many different designs out there, but for the sake of engaging with the definitions, I'd like you to focus on 3 right now. And these are just sort of a representation of what Kristy was talking about. On the left there, you have the heated cigarette that's lit with a match, and it has a carbon tip that provides heat to the tobacco inside. At the top, you have a heated cigarette with a battery and a heating blade that sort of activates by pushing into the plug, and you get an aerosol through it. And then third, it's been mentioned a few times, this one at the bottom is a device that uses a battery to heat PGVG, which then is forced through to processed tobacco leaf to get both nicotine and flavoring. Each of these might require a different analysis for your definitions, because the definitions hinge not just on what's in the product, but also how they work. Some definitions might be solidly applicable to the first example, but not the other two, or definitions might depend on a battery and a heating element, so it would be the converse. Now, before you get overwhelmed with all of that, I'm happy to report that the Center has attempted to get each state and territory's analysis off to a good start with a 50 state and territory survey similar to the resource we already have for e-cigarettes on our website. Drawing from that analysis, we have some general trends among the existing definitions. First, with smoke-free standards, only a few jurisdictions explicitly cover heated tobacco products, and how the heated cigarette is used might change whether or not the definition applies to it. Second, for minimum legal sales age, most jurisdictions prohibit the sale of tobacco or nicotine products to youth, sometimes covering heated cigarettes with more than one definition. Third, in taxation, under current definitions, many jurisdictions could tax these products as cigarettes, and the rest could generally tax them as other tobacco products. How the heated cigarette is used, again, might change its tax status, as we'll see. In each of these fields, they all rely on definitions, and in any one state, the definitions from tax, for example, won't be applicable necessarily to the definition of smoking in the same standard. So one thing to keep straight throughout is that if a heated cigarette is covered under one of your state's definitions, that's no guarantee that it's covered under the two other arenas. It'll be important to look closely at the specifics from your jurisdiction and each different definition. Luckily, we have this publication and website that we put together to do this very thing and run down the relevant language for you. More about that later. So just to launch in with smoke-free standards, the way they often work is that in almost every jurisdiction, there's a definition of the word smoking, and then there's another section of law that limits where smoking can occur. So our analysis will focus in on that definition. Does smoking cover these different types of heated cigarettes, or does it not? The generic definition you're looking at here mirrors many existing standards in states and territories. And you'll see in this first example that the main issue is the interpretation of one word, lighted. If the heated product is lighted, then it's going to be covered here because all lighted tobacco products fall within the definition. As a second generic example, we have this definition, a little bit shorter, but it has another word that you have to interpret, burning. Under this hypothetical jurisdiction's definition, a heated cigarette would have to be both burning and lighted to be included in the smoking definition. The tobacco industry has obviously decided that its new heated products do not burn, but it will be for regulators to decide whether or not this is true under their existing law. So this brings up a pretty basic question. What does burning or lighted mean? Without existing interpretations in the tobacco control realm from US jurisdictions, we have to look to other sources that policymakers and courts would use. There are potential answers in places like dictionaries, scientific understanding, and legal precedent from other areas of law. So to start off with one, burning, I think with a cigarette, we all kind of think we know what it means. As I said earlier, at heats of 1300 degrees, it is pretty clear to all of us that something is burning. But is the lower limit set by cigarettes, by pipes, or, as Kristy said, a more scientific standard? What guidance do policymakers have in the existing legal system? In the case of burning, there's a legal definition from existing cases in one context, arson. This is a similar inquiry because in arson cases, in most jurisdictions, a structure must be burned in order for there to be arson. It's a necessary element of the crime. So courts have, for more than 100 years, had measures to determine whether this element has been met. There appears to be some consensus among leading cases that visible destruction to even a small patch of a structure, charring or blistering of a surface is a trigger for the burned element in an arson case. Thus, in the case of this dumpster fire, the dumpster is burning, but the cement wall behind it could also be burned if the fire damages or marks it, or the light above the dumpster might be burned if the heat from that fire warps or blisters its surface. While this court interpretation has not yet been moved over to the world of tobacco control, it at least has an established legal weight and could help policymakers in deciding whether a heated cigarette burns. And just to compare here, it's worth asking again, do these products burn? These are examples of what some of the products look like after they are used or consumed. And while they have not been entirely reduced to ash, they do seem to have undergone physical change and damage from the application of heat. It seems that under some courts' understanding, these products are burned, but it will be for regulators to decide how to interpret the term. Moving on, lighted is a little more amorphous, as we use the word to mean a lot of things. Just look in the dictionary for the full range. It does not seem that there's an established court interpretation for this term in a realm that would be relevant to tobacco control. Thus, state courts could look to many sources to interpret what it might mean, and they might end up with different takes. A lot of us mean this when we talk about lighted: striking a match or lighting a lighter. Therefore, you could say that this visual representation of lighted is certainly sufficient, but the term could be interpreted more broadly. It's sufficient, but not necessary. In that respect, it seems that a heated cigarette that is lit with a match or lighter would be lighted, but keep in mind that there are those other two styles, the ones that use batteries to heat either liquid or to directly heat processed tobacco leaf. This concept of lighted doesn't resolve whether those two are lighted. Can those be lighted without being lit with a match? And this sort of gets to a philosophical or linguistic question. If you look at the dictionary definition, it includes both activating with a match, both lighting with a match rather, and illuminating by turning a light on. Lighting can include activating a light. So you could see a battery-operated heated cigarette as being lighted when it is switched on or when it is sucked on, activating the heater. Moreover, some of the battery-operated heated cigarettes actually do illuminate when they're on. There's a lighted indicator to show that it's working. But due to ambiguity, some jurisdictions might instead hold to the idea that in this context, lighted only means to apply fire to something. The term remains ambiguous, and our analysis of many of these standards are that they do not automatically cover heated cigarettes because of this lingering ambiguity over lighted. Switching gears, a more certain realm of law seems to be minimum legal sales age. Different states and territories establish an age that purchasers must reach to obtain tobacco products. In most states, it's 18, but some set it at 19 or even 21. Our analysis looked at multiple definitions for cigarettes, tobacco products, vapor products, alternative nicotine products, electronic delivery products, all sorts of things. And we found in most jurisdictions, heated cigarettes are covered, potentially double covered by these definitions. For example, some definitions explicitly require a battery and heating element, and so two of the styles we talked about would be covered there. But tobacco products might also include anything made with tobacco leaves, so they would be covered under that as well. The ambiguity sometimes came from which definition applied, but each jurisdiction uses these definitions to catch a whole suite of products and then applies the same prohibition on sales to all of them. So we found that most states and territories have covered heated cigarettes in one way or another. In some states, a minority of jurisdictions did not have a comprehensive definition, but these states nonetheless included the prohibition of selling any tobacco to underage consumers. So they were able to catch heated cigarettes, which all contain processed tobacco leaf, without comprehensively using a definition to cover it. Again, I'll encourage you at the end to check out our analysis to see where your jurisdiction might fall, what are the current definitions applicability to these products. Moving on again to taxation. In taxation, our survey largely looked at whether or not a heated cigarette product would be covered as a cigarette under existing state and territorial laws. This is because taxation of cigarettes, as opposed to other designations like tobacco products or vapor products, is generally more protective of public health. States have more comprehensive measures to assure taxation, and the rates are set at a rate that discourages youth initiation. So in my discussion today, we'll be talking about the existing definition of cigarettes, but if you drill down in the survey, you'll see that we had follow-up analysis of whether a product that was not covered as a cigarette might be covered under another definition. And the definitions are even a little bit longer here, but this is just a generic example again. In this realm, our survey found many similar definitions. Describing cigarette as a roll for smoking, wrapped in paper or substances other than tobacco. Definitions might also include the weight of a certain number of cigarettes in order to make sure they are of a uniform size. In interpreting this language for heated cigarettes, it's important to look at roll for smoking. As we discussed in the smoke-free context, whether these products are for smoking can be ambiguous, and tax definitions do not contain any definition of the word smoking that would help resolve what it means. There's also not a definition of the word roll because in the case of existing cigarettes, there's not much variation in that general design. Also, and similar to roll, many definitions use the word wrapper or wrapped. It might mean that some heated cigarettes are more likely to be covered than others. These terms have dictionary definitions that one could delve into, but in the end, when applied to heated cigarettes, we determined that they are ambiguous. They might apply and they might not. This gives the tax authority some discretion and room to interpret, but a stronger position for the agency would be to have definitions that unambiguously covered the new products. And just by way of comparison, real quick, this is the federal definition of a cigarette. And you'll see if you skim that real quick that there isn't the words for smoking, demonstrating that in defining a cigarette, you don't really need to use those two words. Nonetheless, it does have the words roll and wrapped. So just to see how federal law has already been applied, looking at two of the products we're talking about, one lit with a match and the other one with a heating element and a heated blade, they are self-identified on their packaging as Class A cigarettes under federal law. But by comparison, the third one we were talking about with the PGVG that's heated and pushed through a processed tobacco cap, it's being labeled as pipe tobacco. So the industry seems to be comfortable pushing these definitions to achieve different outcomes in taxation and regulation. But looking at all three of them together again, is it obvious that the two would be cigarettes and the other one a pipe? A pipe with a tube of tobacco that you draw a heated aerosol through. So talking about just an average state to sort of apply what we've learned, let's go to hypothetical state X where the minimum legal sales age applies to tobacco products, including heated cigarettes, but the smoke-free and tax definitions are ambiguous. What might lawmakers do to clear up this ambiguity? They have some options. Here's a pretty standard smoke-free definition of smoking that might look familiar to some people. It's comprehensive in many respects. It includes nicotine and plant products and includes synthetic products and even e-cigarettes. But the use of lighted here could make application of heated cigarettes ambiguous. So the first change would be to add, as some states already have, the words or heated. You'll see here that pairing it with lighted removes any doubt about whether a heated product is meant to be included. Another clarifying step State X could take would be to add heated or activated, which would be even more clear in covering products that rely on batteries to provide the heat. By including both, one is more sure to capture both heated cigarettes that are lit with a match and those other models that use a battery and heating element. This definition, while longer, is also comprehensive enough to cover all of the new products that we're talking about today. Over in tax, State X has that very common definition that I was telling you about before. And some of the options here are to remove the words for smoking, somewhat consistent with federal standards. Beyond that, quite a few states, about half, have used covered in addition to wrapped or instead of wrapped, which is a more comprehensive term in some respects. And then for roll, it could either be defined so someone interpreting it had an idea of what was meant, or you could add some extra language like roll, tube, or similar shape to be sure to cover all these other products that might not immediately look like rolls. Okay, and for any particular jurisdiction, the starting point for definitions will be to have a look at the survey that we've put together and put up on our website. And that is accompanied by our fact sheet, which also talks more about the different products that Kristy covered today and gives that information. Now that's a first step, I would say, because you have to keep in mind that the center is here to back up this general information with directed technical assistance. As Natalie said, a big part of our work is providing free technical assistance to public health professionals, and that's largely legal research and policy development. Our analysis in these publications can be expanded upon and compared against other factors that are relevant to your jurisdiction. To have a full understanding of heated cigarettes as they relate to your state or territory, please feel free to ask. And with that, I'll hand it back to Natalie for any questions.
So the first question is for Kristy. And the question is, how soon will we know if heated cigarettes are less harmful than conventional combustible cigarettes?
So I wish I had a crystal ball, and I wish that I could say that there will be a day when we'll wake up in the morning and we'll know that these products are definitely less harmful. But I think that the findings of the Tobacco Product Scientific Advisory Committee were helpful in sort of us understanding where we are with respect to the state of the evidence that was provided by Philip Morris in its IQOS application to make modified risk claims. So in January 2018, that scientific advisory committee met, as I mentioned. That committee advises the FDA, and they reviewed the 2 million page application from Philip Morris. And they overall found the scientific evidence that was provided by Philip Morris was insufficient to support the claim that IQOS reduces the risk of tobacco-related disease, or that it is likely to lead adult smokers to switch completely from cigarettes to their products. What that advisory committee did conclude, though, was that Philip Morris had demonstrated that, and I quote, "Scientific studies have shown that switching completely from cigarettes to the IQOS system significantly reduces your body's exposure to harmful or potentially harmful chemicals." Because they voted that does not mean that FDA will necessarily grant that claim to be made. It's now the ball is in my colleagues at FDA's court as to what to ultimately determine with respect to that application. But I think that we will continue to see the evidence emerge. Actually, just today, the tobacco control, the journal Tobacco Control, which comes from BMJ, had a number of articles related to heated tobacco products, and that evidence really is starting to emerge from more independent sources.
I just want to remind participants, if you would like to ask any questions, you can ask it in the Q&A section that Brandon mentioned at the beginning. The next question is for whoever. If the profit margins on heated cigarettes are higher, then can we expect the industry to stop selling conventional combustible cigarettes altogether? Kristy, I don't know if you want to answer that one.
Yeah, sure. I mean, I can't speak for cigarette manufacturers. I think that's really a question for the tobacco companies to decide themselves. It does seem that these products may provide an incentive to switch. We know that Philip Morris International has made a statement that they are committed to a smoke-free generation, and that they ultimately plan to replace the combusted cigarettes that they sell with their quote-unquote reduced risk product portfolios. But they have not set an end date for that, and we know that the same company has continued to aggressively market their products both in the United States and internationally.
The next question is, Have some states already changed their definitions to cover these products? Hudson, do you want to answer that?
I'd love to. Off the top of my head, I know that California and I believe Hawaii have updated their definitions of smoking to include heated products. And there might be a couple more. Interestingly enough, Colorado has updated its definition of smoking to include marijuana, but it's kept the word burning in there, or burned, or something like that. You'll have to check the website to be exactly sure what I'm talking about. But so there have been jurisdictions that have explicitly included heated in this definition of smoking. We haven't seen a lot of evolution in the tax definitions. So it is still a pretty new thing among most states.
Thank you, Hudson. Another question that we received was, given other emerging products like Juul and the FDA's focus on reducing nicotine levels in cigarettes, how much relative increased focus should tobacco control give to heated tobacco products? And I can take a stab at that question. I think that one thing that we addressed when we discussed the nicotine standard, when the FDA asked for comment on that, was to make sure that heated cigarettes are treated like cigarettes and that we reduce nicotine in heated cigarettes as well because of the lack of knowledge of health harms. So I think that is important to think about when you're regulating heated cigarettes. If you can regulate them in the way that's most protective of public health, then it's often to treat them as cigarettes.
This is Kristy, and I would just chime in on the sort of the public health research, surveillance, et cetera, perspective. I think we have a real opportunity in that these products are not widely marketed in the United States to be prepared with our surveillance systems, our communications to the public, and to be thinking about policy on the front end. With e-cigarettes, the products emerged in 2007, and it wasn't until a couple of years later that we began asking questions in our surveys about the products. So I think we have the benefit of hindsight to see that to be able to anticipate these products moving forward. The other point I'd like to make is that just because we are beginning to be comprehensive and to anticipate these products doesn't mean that we should stop putting the pedal to the metal on combusted tobacco products. These products are in the news a lot and are in the news a whole lot more than combusted cigarettes. But I think it's really important for all of us to remember, A, that cigarettes are by far the most commonly sold tobacco product in the United States, both here and globally. They account for nearly 90% of all tobacco product revenues, and that includes e-cigarettes. And we also know that they are responsible for the overwhelming burden of both death and disease from tobacco products. So what we don't want is for these products to take us off guard and become a distraction from our core work of eliminating smoking and the disease and death caused by smoking.
Kristy, you're on deck here again. One question that's being asked are we seeing these products being marketed to youth?
There's actually a study that just came out that I didn't have time to read today about awareness and overuse of these products among younger adults in Korea. There have also been studies showing that younger people are more commonly trying and using these products in Japan, where they're more widely sold. So it's something that we definitely need to be concerned about, and there are aspects of these products that we already know appeal to young people. So we know that technology appeals to young people, and I have an IQOS in my possession that I got from Italy, and the box is white and it looks very much like an Apple product. So I think that the appeal of of the technology has the potential to appeal to young people, much as the technology associated with some of these e-cigarette platforms has appealed to young people.
And to just echo what Kristy's saying, yeah, so the technology nature, we know that that was similar with e-cigarettes, that youth are attracted to fancy gizmos like that. So because a lot of them do use this technology, it's reasonable to assume that they would be attracted to youth, but also to, Kristy mentioned, you know, international studies that have looked at this issue, but because there are no legally marketed products here in the US, we don't really have answers about how the marketing has worked in the United States. I think that's going to end our presentation for today. I just want to remind everyone that we have those resources on our website and that this recording will be available in our archives tomorrow. So please check there if you missed something or you want to refresh yourself. Thank you.